All politics is local.
Or the tariffs.
And look, if you're a retired person in Pennsylvania, Erie or Scranton, what do you really want out of life? You want your kids to get jobs close enough they can drive home. And this is about trying to keep some of the jobs in Pennsylvania. This is Pat Buchanan stuff. It's economic nationalism. It's the feeling people have that Trump said, I will be with you.
I know, but this was Pat Buchanan's message in 1992.
I know.
I mean, this was Pat Buchanan 25 years ago.
They're still there.
Who's still there?
The Pennsylvania voters.
Does Joe Scarborough understand how to follow facts and data? Right. Pat Buchanan was making the point in 1992, the snowy fields of New Hampshire, that America would lose her dominance in the world and our freedom would be diminished if we allowed our manufacturing base to erode through these cockamamie international trade deals that were nearly impossible to enforce and which would be aligned against American interests in a variety of ways. He warned about a mass crush of immigrants in the country who we could not assimilate, and frankly, whose skills, low skills, were going to impede the job growth and prospects of the lower middle class Americans. And he was way ahead of the curve. So rather than criticize Pat Buchanan, Joe Scarborough should be saying, if he had any sense, Buchanan was right. The globalists were wrong. China's a threat. And now the open borders policies have come back to haunt us in crime, in more strife, and social disunity. And yet it's like they learn nothing. Joining us now, the aforementioned Pat Buchanan, conservative commentator extraordinaire, writer, author, thinker. Pat, you should just go home and go back to bed now after that introduction.
I am home.
How are you, Pat?
I did see that segment on Joe.
Yeah.
Chris was very gracious.
Well, Pat,
look,
go ahead. Take it away.
Let me just say, since '92 has happened, look, the whole free trade globalist agenda is a consequence of that. We've had those $12 trillion in trade deficits, $4 trillion with China. In the first decade of this century, we lost 55,000 factories and 6 million manufacturing jobs. Now, this is the world that's being created by globalists. They don't really care about a nation. They just look at the world and say, what is the best system to devise for mankind? But those of us who are conservatives and traditionalists believe the economy should be made and established for the benefit of the American people, a unique, separate, independent people. It should be designed so that they rely upon one another, rely upon each other for food and clothing and housing, as Hamilton said, and that they have all the means of their own defense, and that you have a middle class with the highest standard of living in the world that steadily rises. This is how you structure your economy with this great goal in mind. You don't read some 19th century Cobdenite idiot and tell you how you ought to restructure your country. Nobody has ever built a country that way.
What the globalists are saying now, and I'm sure one of the chief globalists on his way out the door, Gary Cohn, is that the international trade has benefited the country. The idea of building up walls to trade is just going to take us back. We're not going back to the industrial age, robotics, mechanization, technology changes. We should be embracing new jobs for the new century, new types of jobs with these new technologies, and not be looking back to the 1940s and 50s that are long since gone. Well, how do you respond to that?
Well, look, we should do both. If you're going to build robots, who's going to build them? Where are they going to be made? If your factory and your manufacturing plant is nearby, the technology is being investigated nearby. Why would you transfer your manufacturing all over the world and the investment in technology that goes with it when you don't have to do that? I mean, I'm not against what they're doing in Silicon Valley, but we got a country of 320 million people, and these people have to be employed, and they have to hold down good jobs, and you want your standard of living of your people to rise. It hasn't been doing that since we've run trade deficits, Laura, since 1974. How did the United States become the greatest manufacturing and agricultural and industrial power and technologically advanced power on earth. We did it through economic patriotism because we said America is the nation itself and its people. They're the ones we have to benefit, and that's how we have to grow. So I think what we're doing is basically we're outsourcing our future.
This is what Ted Cruz said yesterday on the president's proposal for steel and aluminum tariffs.
I think tariffs on steel and aluminum are a mistake. I think there are a lot more jobs in this country that are dependent on steel and aluminum as inputs, and we're going to end up costing more jobs because of the tariffs than will be saved. And that doesn't even factor into account the retaliatory tariffs that we may see Europe and China and other trading partners do, which could hurt farmers, manufacturers. So I disagree with this.
Your reaction to that?
Ted Cruz is a libertarian. I am not. I'm an economic patriot and economic nationalist. Look, with regard to the steel decision, I think what I would have done would have been, when he came in, put low tariffs on all manufactured imports of 5%, then go to 10%, go to 15%. You don't want to exclude imports, but what you want to do is give an advantage to American producers. So I think, and this is coming, because you can't continue. I heard people on television this morning say, trade deficits don't matter. But look at the way they matter to communities and towns and cities and people, and lost jobs and lost factories.
Well, what do they mean to freedom? Right.
Yeah, to a globalist, I mean, as long as more manufacturing is done and prices are and things are cheaper. But look, when you throw your country into global free trade, Laura, you're putting American workers making $20 an hour, initially against Mexicans who are making probably $2 or $3 an hour, and Chinese who are making $1 an hour. So naturally, production is going to go abroad. Is that a good thing? A lot of libertarians, they don't care. If it can be done more cheaply there, it should be. I remember Dick Darman said back in '92, when he was with Bush, if our guys can't hack it, let them go. The country is about our guys, our people. I mean, we ought to devise a system, and our forefathers did it, and for a century and a half we did it, where the United States of America was not only the most advanced and powerful, but totally independent country whose standard of living was the highest in the world. How did they do it? They did it behind tariffs. You can do it again. But this is, one of the things, I realize Trump is being hammered terribly, but I'm with him in his instincts on this, although I would have structured it differently.
Well, I think that, Pat, when you see the progress that is being made on the NAFTA renegotiations, Donald Trump is using these tariffs, in my mind, that were broad-based, they're across-the-board tariffs, and he will probably end up giving some type of exemption for the steel and aluminum, maybe even, the tariff will be lower, to Mexico and Canada for leeway that they give on our autos being made in Mexico coming back into the United States. For countries that aren't China and aren't other real abusers of this, they might get something of a break, but we're going to get a lot back in return. And I think you're going to see this play out in the NAFTA announcement over the next week or two.
Well, you might have knowledge ahead of me, but NAFTA, Canada and Mexico present particular problems. Let me take Canada. I remember a few years back I had the numbers. Canada exports 1/2 of its GDP, and 85% of that goes to the United States. Basically, Canada is being absorbed in its economy. It's becoming a single economy, North America. And to a lesser degree, though, but to some degree, Mexico is. So you've got to deal with Canada differently in this sense. Suppose you put tariffs on steel into the United States. These other countries are liable to dump that. And you exempt Canada, other countries will move their steel through Canada into the United States. It's a very tricky thing to do, especially with the Canadians and Mexicans, but I agree they are a separate case and ought to be handled separately.
Well, and I think, again, these globalists think that they're going to do the same thing over and over again, and I don't even think they think they're going to get a different result. They don't care. They do not care. A lot of them have already made their bets on China. They don't care that China's repressive. It's at the very least, a strategic adversary to the United States. That China's buying up Greece, that China's buying up the United States, that trying to buy major technology companies in this nation, including chip manufacturers and other high supercomputing technologies. But these people just don't care. It's for them. It's a zero-sum game. It doesn't matter.
That's exactly right. It is for them. It's if they got if wages are lower there, then production should be done there in China. They don't see the world as it really is. But I'll tell you, Laura, economic nationalism is on its way back, and there's no doubt about it. When China is beginning to reveal its lovely face, and as it does more and more, people are going to ask, who were the fools that built this regime and this nation into such a mighty thing that it threatens and imperils not only America's position in the world, but threatens much of the world? How did this happen? When I was a little kid, a long time ago, 2 or 3 years old, I remember the most hated guys in America were the guys who stole scrap metal to Japan, as we were told, and it came back to us at Pearl Harbor. I mean, this is economic patriotism is on its way back. This is what you see happening in Italy and Europe and all over Europe. People are rising up and saying, "What our country is for us. Our country is just not part of some larger EU with a bunch of bureaucrats in Brussels telling us how we should live. We are Italians, we are Poles, we are Hungarians, we are Czechs, we are Slovaks. We want the country for us." And I think that is a mood and a spirit. And that's the spirit that elected Donald Trump after people, look, the free traders had a free run of it for the last 25 years. How did they do when the country turned to Donald Trump?
Exactly. And when we look at the caterwauling, we hear the caterwauling of the left. And
music to my ears.
Yeah, that means he's doing something right. Oh, Gary Cohn leaves. Do you think?
I know, my Lord, we've lost Gary.
We were talking about the Bachelor breakup on this show, The Bachelor. It's like, Gary, I don't love you anymore. I don't like what you've done. It's not you, it's me. Actually, it's not me, it's you. So Gary's gone and the market tanks. The globalists like, what's going to happen next? Pat, I loved how they said that populism was on the wane in Europe, and then the Italian populists get all those seats in the election.
Well, exactly. They got the five-star movement, which is a little kooky, but the Salvini is going to be the next prime minister. He's from the Northern League, the old Lega Norda, which is now the Lega, and they before they were going to secede from northern Italy. Let's get rid of Naples and get out of here. But now they've expanded it, and this is what the right has to do. In the populist right in Europe, even the National Front and the others, they're going to have to find a way to meld with the conservative right, which is what basically Trump did. He is populist conservative, and he melded with the Republican Party, which is Reaganite conservative, and he brought these new issues on immigration and on trade and hopefully staying out of these idiotic wars, and put that together with the Reaganite base of cutting taxes, judges like Scalia and Gorsuch, and all these other issues, and you got to marry the two. And this is what I think is going to be happening in Europe, hopefully, and it's happening here, and we'll have to exercise due rights over Gary Cohn.
What do you think? What kind of president do you think China would rather have dealt with? A Hillary Clinton, Jeb Bush type president, or Donald Trump? What do you think the Chinese prefer?
The Chinese, to me, Chinese really take the long view, and Xi Jinping obviously does, going to be president for life. But I think they see themselves as, given the current situation in the world, as themselves as steadily, inexorably, they're growing at 6 or 7%. They're number 2 economy in the world, clearly number 2. And they got 1.4 billion people, and they're gradually growing. And I think they're very smart. They want to avoid the so-called, trap, the Thucydides trap, where declining powers and rising powers get into war like the Brits and Germans did twice. And I think they see the future as theirs, and so I think they're behaving much more toughly. But clearly, there's a terrible danger to them. Last year, Laura, they had a $375 billion trade surplus in goods with the United States. They don't want to lose that. That more than covered their entire defense budget.
Yeah.
I mean, Americans say, well, gee, this is great way things are going. Is it good that we're subsidizing the defense budget of the People's Republic of China to where they're now trying to push us out of the South China Sea, and they're moving, planes and ships around Taiwan? Look, they're on the move.
Well, no, what the libertarians, the economic libertarians, what they like is the fact that you can buy, 5 pairs of pants at Target. Pairs of pants at Target for $5 each. Yeah, that's the future of America. Pat Buchanan, thank you so much. Loved your recent column as well. We have it posted on lauraingram.com. Stay